Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Petra James. I'm the chair of Czech Studies at Université Libre de Bruxelles, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you at tonight's event that is entitled When a Robot Writes Poetry. First, before we start, just a couple of technical information. Please, when you do not speak, switch off your microphones. We will be very pleased to have your questions. If you can first write them to the chat, and we'll come to the discussion at the final part of our evening, and we'll be able to discuss the question that you formulate in the chat. We are online live, so if you do not want to be on the camera, please switch it off. And the event is being registered, so just for your information. Tonight's event, When a Robot Writes Poetry, is organized to commemorate or celebrate the 100th anniversary of the premiere in January 1921 of the famous play by the Czech playwright Karel Čapek, R.U.R. To celebrate that, we want to organize and initiate a discussion around art, artificial intelligence, and creation. To do that, we have the pleasure of having with us and welcoming three guests. The couple that is behind the artificial intelligence Slovak poet Liza Gennart, whose first book of poetry, Results of Origin, that was published in 2020, we will discuss later in the evening. So a very warm welcome to Zuzana Husárová, a fellow academic and multimedia artist, and Ľubomír Panák, a multifaceted and multi-talented artist, but also a programmer who will talk about also the theoretical and more technical aspects behind this interesting project. And I welcome among us also Tomáš Miklica, the initiator of Czech internet project Google Poetry, Google Poezie, and the main author of the eponymous book, who will be able to share with you the project later in the evening. I am very pleased to welcome among us also the students of the Centre d'études tchèques of Université Libre de Bruxelles, and also students of the Czech language course led by Dr. Veronika Tucker from Harvard University, who last week took part in a workshop that was led by Zuzana Husárová and Tomáš Miklica, and whose results will be presented by some of the students in a couple of minutes. Before I start, I really want to thank all the people that made this evening possible, our friends and collaborators from the Czech Cultural Center, Eva Petráková, Daniela Vervloet, and also my colleague Jitka Hejlová, who came with the idea of this event and who organized the workshop last week. So a very warm welcome and a big thank you to all of you. So let's start with our evening. And as we will talk about robots, I would like to do a brief presentation of this concept. In reality, from the beginnings of European civilization to the 21st century, the automaton, which is, one could say, the old-fashioned term for a robot, has captured the Western imagination and offered a reflecting mirror to the man's own humanity. The fascination with the boundaries between humans and artificial beings has certainly accompanied Western civilization throughout its history. In the book Gods and Robots of 2018, Adrian Mayer writes, I quote, "As early as Homer, Greeks were imagining robotic servants animated statues, and even ancient versions of artificial intelligence. Mythic automata appear in tales about Jason and the Argonauts, Medea, Daedalus, Prometheus, and Pandora. And indeed, many sophisticated animated devices were actually built in antiquity, reaching a climax with the creation of a host of automata in the ancient city of learning, Alexandria, the original Silicon Valley, end of quote. Indeed, the first mention of automata can be probably found in the writings of Hero of Alexandria, the ancient engineer of the 1st century AD. The Hellenistic know-how was later taken over by the new Arabic civilization of Egypt. Thus, the automata resurface in the West through the Eastern channels in the 16th century and become an important feature of the 18th century Enlightenment Europe, especially in France, with the famous automata created by Jacques de Vaucanson, whose flute player and the famous duck automaton, which could eat, fully digest, and even excrete a very credible duck poo already in the 1730s, created a sensation at the French court. The members of the Swiss dynasty of clockmakers, the Jacques-Droz family, are also to be mentioned. They are significant as in the 1770s, they created 3 automata, still functioning today, by the way, that were able to do activities that even now are considered as exclusive domains of humans: writing, drawing, and playing music. At the same time, these automata can be considered predecessors of modern computers. The romantic fascination with artificial being is represented, for example, by T.F. Hoffmann's short story Sandman, published in 1816, when a mole man falls in love with a female automaton and his infatuation drives him crazy. We know this story also because it inspired Sigmund Freud in his development of the concept of the uncanny. The second romantic key text is that of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, subtitled The Modern Prometheus, interestingly written also in 1816. And we might ask ourselves whether it is just a coincidence that the person who is today considered essential in the genealogy of modern computer science, Ada Lovelace, the one whose work was commented on in the famous article of Alan Turing from 1950, Computing, Machinery, and Intelligence, was the daughter of the most celebrated romantic poet, Lord Byron, who was with Mary Shelley, where she first conceived the idea of her Frankenstein. Thus, artistic creation and artificial intelligence seem to stand hand in hand. So as I already said, today's event is organized to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the premiere of Čapek's theater play, RUR, most famous probably because it introduced to the world and enriched the vocabulary of most languages with the word robot that was coined together with his brother, visual artist and writer Josef Čapek. Karel Čapek was one of the most celebrated Czech writers of the 1920s, and his play brought him immediate international success, soon playing in theaters of London and New York and other important cities. But the title of our evening, When a Robot Writes Poetry, is also a reference to a recent event that marked the 100th anniversary in Prague and which was celebrated by a presentation of a theater play created by artificial intelligence and entitled Když robot píše hru, When a Robot Writes a Theater Play. That's also why we invited the authors of a book of poetry published or conceived, written by artificial intelligence. The word robot is a neologism based on the Slavic word root rob, linked to robota, Czech word robota, which in Czech means the unpaid labor of the serfs, and its meaning is being linked to labor in all Slavic languages, such as in Slovak or Russian, where it means labor or work. Serfdom in Central Europe was not only part of the medieval feudal system, but through the social phenomenon of second serfdom was present well into the 19th century, and for the Habsburg Empire that Bohemia was part of was abolished by payout only in 1848, which meant only rich peasants could immediately set themselves free. Thus, the phenomenon was very much part of the collective cultural memory in Bohemia when Čapek was writing his play in 1920. The plot of the play is structured around the major aspect of the utilitarian use of robots. They are created to liberate man from hard, non-creative labor. The definition and understanding of labor as a social and political phenomenon could not be more topical in Czechoslovakia in 1921, the year of the foundation of the Czechoslovak Communist Party and the foundation of the major avant-garde group Devět Sil, whose members also adhered to communist ideology. Thus, we could read RUR as Čapek's polemics with the understanding of labor in Marxism, but also, I believe, that of Taylorism or Fordism. The use of biblical language and metaphors within Čapek's play, Čapek, who by no means was a Christian author, might also be interpreted as an alternative vocabulary, the one used to contrast the Marxist one or the Taylorist one, dominated by economical concerns and terminology. The title of the play, RUR, is an abbreviation standing for Rossum's Universal Robots, which in the play is the company who holds the monopoly of the production of robots, androids created to perfectly resemble human beings. The legend of Golem was certainly also on Čapek's mind while creating the play. The interest of the founder of the Rossum dynasty was to create a perfect human being in a similar way to the creators of automata in the 18th century. And according to the director of the company in the play, Rossum wanted, I quote, to provide the proof that there has been no need for God. The initial, more ideological projects was taken over by the nephew of the old Rossum, turning the initial experiment into a Fordian profit-making empire and flooding the whole world with robots. As we might expect, the robots in the play revolt against their human masters and call for a worldwide revolution that is successful. In the end, when the whole of humanity is all but wiped out, the robots attack the island of the original Rossum production plant and kill everyone except Alquist, who is believed to detain the original formula of the fabrication of robots. However, the formula had been destroyed by Helena, the central female character, in the hope of restoring the natural order of the world, when she realizes that women can no longer bear children, the production of life having been taken over by the overproduction of robots. The play ends when Alquist, the last human alive, realizes that two robots, a male and a female, fell in love and reacquired the humanity that had been lost, the joy coming from simple sensorial, sensual, and aesthetic pleasures, and the capacity of self-sacrificing love and compassion. In the closing scene, Alquist quotes from the book of biblical Genesis and refers to the robots as the new Adam and Eve, who will be able to open up a space for a new civilization. Thus, against the Marxist solution of a just allotment of labor, which in the play does not lead to the eternal peace and happiness, but to a proliferation of wars, or in contrast to the Fordist, very utilitarian definition, Čapek incites humans to go back to the basic humanist values. In the play, the leaflet of revolutionary propaganda inciting robots of the world to revolt sums up why the robots should win, in their opinion. They claim in the poster that they are, I quote, higher up the evolutionary ladder than humans, that they are more intelligent and stronger, and then man is their parasite. The tension between human and artificial, as well as the basic conflict of Čapek's play, has inspired other writers and has left indelible trace in Western pop culture. A well-known American science fiction writer, Philip K. Dick, took RUR as his inspiration while writing his short story, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep of 1968. While you might have not read this text, you certainly know and probably have seen the cult movie by Ridley Scott, Blade Runner of 1982, based on Dick's story, and which is a modern take on the Chapkian theme of the robot revolt. Long before Martin Scorsese's Hugo Cabret of 2011, Scott's Blade Runner is also a magnificent homage to the Western history of automata through the automata animals present in the film, such as the Tyrrell owl, and the fabulous android automata fabricated by the lonely employee of the Tyrrell company, Sebastian, that the replicants take advantage of in order to get to Tyrrell. The Chapkian theme of the saving power of humanist values is further enhanced in the Blade Runner sequel, Blade Runner 2049 of 2017. All these artistic and pop cultural representation of interaction between the human creator and its creation put forward the inherent tension without such a relationship that often escalates into a conflict with mostly tragic consequences. But if, and maybe, if we taught robots to write poetry or to engage in artistic activities, the outcome might have been a different one. Artistic creation as a way of engaging dialogue with artificial intelligence was followed by our students and students of Harvard University last week when they tried to create their own Google poetry while being guided by the guests of our evening today, Tomáš Miklica and Zuzana Husárová. And so I have now the pleasure of giving the floor to the representatives of our students, Joanna Ganovský and Eles Sivat, who will present you a short video of the workshop and will sum up their experience with this type of creation. So I give them the floor and thank them for their participation.
Thank you very much, Miss. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eles Sivat and I'm a student at the ULB. And last week I had the chance to participate to the workshop. And actually it was really the first time that I heard about Google poetry and the possible combination of artificial intelligence and poetry. So it was really amazing. And also it was a fruitful experience of exchanges with some other students in America. So it was very nice for someone in Belgium. And so the workshop was in two parts. The first one was the discovery of the work of our guest. And it was very interesting to know and to discover how they work with our internet platform that we use every day. And the second part was about to title some poems that they were already wrote. And it was quite difficult to find a good title for a short poem about something on Google. So it was very interesting, and I really liked the experience. And I hope that Joanna shared the same experience with me.
Yes, so hello everyone. Should say good evening. So I'm Joanna Ganovský and I'm a student at the ULB also. And as a student of language and literature, I found the workshop very interesting because we don't really get the chance to study about literature that was made by a computer or by some form of technology, which is very interesting to see that there's not only a literary way to write literature, I mean, a human way more of. So to me, it was very fun to explore that side of the literature that I don't have the chance to study in class. I really enjoyed the workshop because it was original, it was complex, and because also we had the chance to confront our point of view with a lot of people from different sides of the world. so from America, from Europe, the different parts of Europe, which was very interesting to me, very fascinating. So yeah, I would like to thank you for this workshop, and also the organizer and the person that were involved in this organization, because for us as students, it was very, very, very interesting, very interactive, and we learned a lot of things that we didn't know. So yeah, thank you, and that's all.
And I think that we will now see the video.
And when robot writes poetry, when robots rule the world, when robot wants to be a mother, when robots become self-aware, when robots take over, when robot wants to be a mother movie, when robot movie release, when robots attack, when robots look too human.
I think this is very poetic. It feels like a collective. It has a political valence, absolutely, because, you know, it's a collectively written poem, and the people who wrote it didn't know they were writing it.
I started Googling just like Czech pronouns, personal pronouns, because I thought it'd be interesting to see what comes up. But it's very much like very unpersonal things, mostly movie titles.
Maybe that is it. Maybe it makes it's still poetic, but it's less artistic in the sense of like artistic relating to the motive of the creator.
Yeah, I think we can at least all agree that we are not the ones who create it. We can only basically discover it. And so if there's a real author, it's the algorithm, it's Google, and we are just basically curating its work.
We titled it Subohem Ashatacek because Luisa realized the first search, the Bilo to Krasne a Bilo to Hodost, is sort of word for word from a poem by Nezval Vyacheslav, which is also called that. And because when we were discussing this, we kind of thought there was like an imagery of like a love that had happened, like a romance.
I think we named it Milovana Panda because you can create a narrative of the panda being part of the love story, I guess.
Our group chose the poem C, and we named it Existuje Google. Because we really thought it was the definition of Google, existential questions, but also some random questions. So we thought it would be quite funny to name it Existuje Google.
Why don't you ask somebody who's kind of your friends as well as you ask Google the same questions? So I think those data that you get are very often the ones that we are afraid to ask our closest friends. So that's why it might be interesting, because you get something that you wouldn't normally ask. Or we are so alone that we don't even ask questions.
I think I have a question.
Děkujeme. Nashledanou. Nashledanou, mějte se hezky.
Nashledanou, děkuji.
Nashledanou. Nashledanou.
Well, thank you very much to the students and to everyone who participated and organized the workshop. We will be able to discuss it more at the end. But one of the central questions that we can follow up on that we heard in the commentaries of the students was, who is the author? Who is the author of this type of poetry? And that's a question that we will also be asking while moving to our first guest, Liza Gennart, the artificial intelligence Slovak poetess, who in 2020 published her first book of poetry, Výsledky vzniku, the results of origin. And I would like to welcome her parents, because that's how they often present themselves, Ľubomír Panák and Zuzana Husárová. And before I give them the floor so that they would present us this project, I have a question for them that comes from Čap Explain. Domin, the director of the RUR company, describes as follows the capacity of his robots. He says, they have great memory. If you read to them 20 volumes of encyclopedia, they will repeat everything in order. They can never invent anything new. They could very well teach at university, Čapek satirically adds. So my question for you, Ľubomír and Zuzana, is, can Liza Gennart invent something she was not fed? Can she invent something new? How has it changed on the robot front since 1921? How does the program work? And what can it, or should I say she, do? Can you present us your project of artificial intelligence and poetry? And the floor is yours. A very warm welcome.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you very much for so many questions at the beginning. We have just started and have already so many answers. So basically the question, the idea of the robots, she's not really a robot. That's the first thing. She's a neural network. So it's a program that was fine-tuned. So that's the first difference. Like, she doesn't have a body. We just invented it. We just invented a personality and the name behind it. But I mean, we could also do it otherwise. So this was our choice to create a fictional identity that creates poetry, but it's not a robot. The other thing, if she can invent something, many people who read the poetry say that she has a specific style that, has a little parts of the styles of some of the Slovak authors, because she learned, she basically read several times 2,100 works of Slovak poetry. It was the combination of the books, of the journals, and the old works. So many people say that she might have read more literature than other people and other poets. And she has her own specific style that some people say it sounds or looks a little bit like a being trapped somewhere trying to get to know herself. So this intro will lead me into telling you something about Liza Gennart, who is a fictional identity. It's a neural network that writes Slovak poetry, and we made a book for her. This book is called Výsledky vzniku, or the outcomes of origin. And we did a conceptual framework and let her generate poems based on different themes or topics on names. We call her Liza because it's the combination of the names of Ľubomír and Zuzana, and Gennart means generative art. We gave their special N just for fun, to have the little bit of artistic freedom. And we also wanted to create a female. So many people read her like a 20-something student of artificial intelligence and neural science. And she's also interested in poetry and the feminist theories. So it's all the works that were put into her that she learned to read, and then she created something out of it. And we present her in the text at the beginning of the book as our third daughter, because we already have two our daughters, and I am the mother and Ľubomír is the father. But here I am the father and Ľubomír is the mother, because Ľubomír did the hard job of creating her out of the program and basically breeding her and giving her the form. I did the easy paternal job of playing with her, getting her to do interesting things and teaching her in some way. So we exchanged the roles, and that might be also like the initial insight into some of the people that she might not be a human, because we try to play at the beginning like a mystification that we presented her just with there's a name in the journal, and she presented the poems, but this might have been the hint that there's something other than human written poetry. So and this our work is we meant it as the contribution to the experimental Slovak poetry, and not in any way of trying to get rid of the human authors. So we don't see it as the way where the human poets should disappear or be at the end of their journey, but most of our poet friends see it as a kind of like a funny contribution to what we are all doing here. So she's like a nice like a mixture of different voices that appear in the Slovak poetry mostly after 89. And I'll give word to Ľubomír, who tells you a little bit about the technical sides.
So yeah, she is a woman because in Slovak language or in Slavic language is actually neural network. Sieť is a female character or female word. So it started shortly after Google released their Deep Dream algorithm, which was algorithm generating all those pictures of puppies looking like snails or people or some hallucinations. And shortly after that, there was released algorithm to generate text as well. So we wanted to try how good this algorithm is. And the thing is that almost every programmer is using for training the neural network on text, some old text, like mostly it's Shakespeare dataset, to show that neural network is good at generating Shakespearean-like text. And we wanted to actually see how the neural networks will work with more contemporary texts, which work slightly in different way comparing to Shakespeare. So the first thing was to get dataset. This is the most important part of the work. And at the end, we ended like going through the process of training the neural network. The whole technology like moves forward really fast. So in some point there was released GPT-2 language model by OpenAI organization. And this language model was trained basically on really a lot of English text from Wikipedia and from Reddit. Good thing about this model is that you can fine-tune it. So you can take your own texts and use what this model already knows about how language works, how the words are created and how the sentences are built, and feed them some texts which are more concrete to some theme. And this is what we did. So because Slovakia is a small country, we and Zuzana is a poet and author. She already knows a lot of people which has publishing houses, which releases journals and so on. So we asked them, and Zuzana asked them if they can provide us texts which are related to contemporary or newer Slovak poetry. And we luckily got them. So there were publishing houses, journals, and we as well mixed there some old texts from open access database. And we selected mostly female authors and some like really important authors of that ages. So this was our data set. So we had a lot of text in Slovak. We put them together in one big text file, and then we fed it to a program called Simple GPT-2, created by Minimaxir, or his name is Max Wolf. So he released a code which you can use, and you can use it in the cloud. So you don't need really powerful computer, because for training neural network, you need data and computer, and that computer must be really powerful because it is doing a lot of computations. There are not so hard computations, but there happen to be many of them. Because when you are learning the neural network, the program actually, what the program actually does, it goes through the data you fed into it and tries to recognize there are some patterns, and it does it really like a lot of times. And at the end, it's just simple statistical math, but you had to do it a lot of times. And good thing is, and if possible, you have to process those data in parallel manner to find some distinctive relations between these patterns. So when you have a text and you have the program, which you can run in cloud, not on your own computer, you can fine-tune the existing model. So as I said, GPT-2 is trained on mostly English text, so it does not have knowledge of nothing of Slovak language. So the language model learned about Slovak language through the poetry. So actually, if you asked it something, it will not write you like some real answer, but that the outcoming text will be poetic in some way, because the data contains only poetic texts. So actually, I can show you how the program sees the text you fed into it. Because what you need to do is to tokenize the text. This is the original sentence, and the sentence was tokenized to some subwords. It is byte per encoding algorithm, which you can like find out searching how it works. And then when you have all the words converted to something like this, you can convert it to numbers. And when you are training the algorithm sees only these numbers. So it really does not know anything about the data. It can be picture, it can be text, it can be anything what you imagine. So this is the result of how the program sees the text. And actually what it tries to do is, you can imagine this data as a chart of or graph of time series data, and the algorithm tries to find patterns in there and actually predict next value or next part of the chart based on what you feed it at the beginning based on what he saw before, actually what he learned from the original data. So when the model is learning, after some iterations, you can see like there is option to check the output of how good that model is. And what you will see when you will be training some language model, that it really works in a way of how children are learning to speak. So at the beginning, in the very early stages, the text does not make any sense. It's just babbling, but it shows some characteristics of written text. That text is it is bunch of some letters, and more letters make somehow words, and there is space between them, and you can see that it understands the structure of a sentence at the beginning, but those words they don't make any sense. And more it reads the text, it gets better understanding of how the text works, and the quality of the text improves. So when you see that those texts produced during the learning are good enough, you can stop the algorithm. So it's like reading a lot of books and on repeat to figure out how to write the text. So the actual GPT-2, which was for English language, somehow find out how Slovak language works. And because it's, as I said, it was poetry, it's found out how poetry in Slovak language works. I will show you now how it works when we generate some poem. I will not run a program, but I will show you how such things work. And yeah, this is the Max Wolf who created this program for transfer to fine-tune the GPT-2 model. And this is how it looks in Google Colab. So at first you need to install some libraries which can do that thing. This is stripped out version of what Minimax here did. His original code from GitHub has a lot of comments explaining which part is doing. So the GPT-2 model has different versions. There is small version, medium version, and large version, and extra large version, and they are slightly different on the output quality. So we use the medium model because you can still train that model on normal machine because what they are using, it's like a lot of machines doing this stuff together. So you fetch the actual model from OpenAI. This program works that you can mount your Google Drive where you have stored the data to learn on. So actually this is the name of all the text in one text file, which Liza uses to learn from. And if you have trained some model, you can load the model as well from the Google. Then you have to start session and load existing model or start to train. The training part is not in here. Here is only the part where we are loading existing trained model, which we trained before, and then you can generate text by saying how long the text should be. These are how many tokens it should generate and how many tries it should give. And you can as well pass there some input phrase to initialize the generator. And actually this is without the phrase. So it just initializes the whole sequence by some noise and tries to continue on that noise, and you can see the result of how it looks like. So some poems in the book were written in this way, that we let Liza do freestyle and Zuzana chose the best work. And for some poems, Zuzana chose some starting sentences or titles, or we just generated from the freestyle, or we took some lines from the freestyle work to use it as a title and initializing text. So here we let Liza generate some texts which were initialized by a sentence when robot is writing poetry in Slovak. So these are the poems which she wrote on that theme. So it starts here because this is something for debugging only, and you can see the text. So this is the first text. This is second text. We told her to create 10 texts. And this is another one. And yeah, it goes like that. And how the book was written, that Zuzana chose actually the theme of the book and how the book should work, and she was putting it together. So you can read on net that this is unsupervised algorithm, but actually still to get good text, you need a supervisor, like when a human is writing some text, which takes good text and somehow edits them. But in the books, those texts were edited only slightly, and only in few texts. So Zuzana chose texts which were best for the
concept of
the work. So this is how it works on technical part, and here I can answer the question about the chat actually started with that robots can remember anything and replicate anything word by word. This is not how neural networks works. Neural network actually does not have a database. It's not sampling from the database. It's not combinatorics of like I have this text and I put it together, but it actually creates the text from what it read.
So basically, it reads something, it tells itself somehow that this is like a poetry and tries to replicate the style or combination of styles. So it's not generating like we had in 1950s until 1990s or 2000, where the poetry, generated poetry was generated from the samples. So the computer took like third word and the fifth word and the seventh word and put together a sentence. So this is a completely different approach.
Well, thank you so much for this introductory explanation, and also for the privilege of looking into your creative lab. It's fascinating to be able to, take off the lid of this mystery of artificial intelligence writing poetry. I was also from the beginning, when I heard about your project, I was very much captivated by by the gendered identity that you decided to give to your artificial poet, Liza Gennart. Now I have the answer concerning the name, but still I have one question. Now I understand where the name comes from, but still I was struck by the fact that on the one hand, you say, and it's quite clear even in the collection, that it really is an homage to Slovak contemporary poetry. But at the same time, the name of the poet is not really a classical Slovak name, and it doesn't even take like the Slavic typical suffix ova, which today there are discussions about it, because although it is just a cultural usage, it also implicates the suffix ova, implicates some kind of paternalistic family or social structure, because there is this implication of the woman belonging to the family of the father and then of the husband if she takes his name. So I was wondering whether this was also somehow part of your project. And the other thing that I really liked in your presentation is the fact that you present her as your child with this gender reversed roles, father and mother, for two reasons. Because going back to all these cultural images of artificial intelligence, in one of the dialogues that Frankenstein has with his creator, he actually reproaches him for not giving him a mother, not only in the biological sense, like not having been born in the natural way, but also not having this, maternal presence who would somehow be there and prevent him from doing evil things. So that was like the idea of having both a mother and a father was interesting to me. And additionally, the idea that you present her as your child, because very often, like even in the text that I quoted, the artificial intelligence is presented in a gendered but rather sexualized way. It's usually like in the archetypal woman, Pygmalion, her existence actually is made possible through the male gaze. So you also take off this kind of sexualized identity of your poet. So can you tell me something more about this?
The thing is that I also teach the class in Brno that deals with kind of robots in humanities. And when you think about the history of it, the most famous, there's Pygmalion, then there are other basically like pre-science fiction works that already had elements of science fiction. And very often it is the muse of a male. Exactly, like she's the muse of a male because they cannot find a perfect woman, so they create one. Like Eve was created out of the male as well, just to exist. So we didn't want this at all, and we wanted her to stand for her own, like not to be a male's gay representative, or not to have needing to have a proper father or proper husband or a proper another entity where she has to belong, but we wanted her to speak for herself. Of course, she doesn't really speak for herself, but I mean, she's still, I created her. So I'm still the father who created her. So that's not completely correct, but somebody had to do it. So I tried to do it as respectfully as possible. But there are also all these things where the neural network or the robots exist only in relations to somebody who is more powerful and is usually a male. So we wanted to get rid of this, and it also works nicely that in Slovak you have sieć and inteligencia, which are female gender because of the linguistics. So I don't know why an artificial intelligence should be a male. So it doesn't make any linguistic sense. So that was also a reason. And also the reason that I really like progressive female poetry and progressive female literature. So basically, there wasn't even a debate that it should be male.
Yeah,
it was just all of a sudden yeah, she has to be female. We didn't even consider the other option or like genderless option because we wanted to do the mystification. So
yeah, and on that mystification, getting rid of the ova was part of her personality because she lives in Vienna. That we had to decide why the language is sometimes clunky. So when we were thinking of her character, she lives in Vienna. She was born in Vienna somehow, or in Slovak family.
Like Jara Zimmerman.
Exactly, like Jara Zimmerman.
For example, yeah. And she studies data science, all things attached to neural networks. And yeah, that's the reason of getting rid of ova. And Zuzana actually as well has our common name without the ova. She keeps her girl's name
with ova, and the middle name is just Panák.
Yeah.
So yeah, the ovas are debatable in our family.
Okay. Well, that's. I think this all is very very exciting. And now I have another question, probably to both of you, concerning the thresholds and the ensembles, the wholes that the artificial intelligence that Liza can create. Because I remember it's also I listened to the debate that followed the presentation of the theater play in Prague, and they were explaining the fact that actually the program is creating like chunks of text, dialogues or parts, but it can't do the whole play, or yet can't do it yet. And so I was also wondering whether the choice of the poetry genre is a reply to this problem, that the program, at least for the moment, is better in dealing with shorter texts, like total, or can it do longer text, or what are the limits of the program in dealing with text that you ask her to write?
The limits are straightly physical, like the computation power and the memory you can utilize at this moment. So probably in the future, neural networks will be able to write longer text and to actually get context of longer text, but probably we, the data scientist needs to think differently about how longer texts are created in human world. So it does not have the sense for longer texts you can create, but it really the neural network really does not know what was happening on page 1 when you are on page 10.
So it usually has the context of like one page where it can know what's happening. So that is one of the things. So if you do a longer thing, you have to really kind of arrange it from different texts. And I don't think then you can really call it done by neural network, because you are arranging the texts. You are skipping like whole pages where it doesn't fit, etc. And we really wanted to make a project that is also interesting regarding the technical part. So we really paid attention to the poem that is almost untouched by humans, almost on the level, like if you write poetry, you also have editor that changes it somehow. So we also change it on these minimal levels, like the editor of the normal book. Like sometimes you made a mistake, but it's not a big mistake. So I chose those that were also interesting for the technical side of it. So that is the proof of where the state of arts in the sciences is, rather than doing something shocking that was happening like 2 or 3 years ago, that the robot wrote a novel. Like we are not really interested in doing shocking revelations or kind of like making a really huge project. And on the other hand, like we deal with poetry. I'm not that much interested in writing prose myself. So we are at home in poetry, and I like poetry because of its experimentation, and you have much more freedom in the poetic experimentation than in others. So that's why it also kind of like fit together that she has to write poetry because of all these limitations.
I would also like to go back to the article that you, Zuzana, co-authored with Karel Piorecký in 2019 on the subject of artificial intelligence and literature. And you basically say in the conclusion that the use of AI in artistic creation and in literature in particular is a way of humanizing, or maybe we can say taming the AI, because you say, and I quote you, if this technology grows of such profoundly human and cultural environment that literature certainly represents, we do not have to be afraid of it. And so I would like to ask you about the social or maybe political dimension of this project, how you envision it.
Yeah, so that's why I also think that we are now in the stage where the neural networks and the training of the whole human networks haven't been done for such a long time on a personal scale, like in the research centers it has been for a longer time, but I mean the everyday humans haven't been doing it for such a long time. And I think that artists should be quite aware of the fact that we are feeding machine something. Like it's Liza and all the other neural networks, they are not open system. Like what we teach her, it doesn't get into like Facebooks or Twitters or else or into the world, and doesn't start, I don't know, setting rockets to the Mars or something. So it's not like you don't have to, it doesn't evolve, you don't have to be afraid of it. But I still think that you have somehow like an ethical responsibility as an artist, what you feed others, like either beings or robots or programs, and what are the results of it. So I wouldn't want to feed her with anything that would create a hatred or racism or anything else. So really cared about also the moral and ethical side of it. So if you are doing it already, we want to replicate something in a humanistic way. Maybe sometime in like 10 or 20 years, when the artificial intelligence will be looking at the first artificial intelligences, they will look at like, oh, he was this funny little Liza that didn't know much, but at least was humanistic. And the results of it will stay. So she will also learn that, I mean, the poetry that has been the center of the human civilization regarding the keeping of the knowledge and keeping of the human faith and fate as the recording of the human like essentiality has been here with us. So why shouldn't she learn something essential and beautiful about us, rather than just what you see as, I don't know, hatred comments or Twitter feeds or something else that might be more easier to get because you have the whole data, but we wanted to do it in a humanistic way.
So you would agree on this with Čapek on the importance of
exactly. Yes,
on the ethical approach and responsible approach to when dealing with modern technology. Yeah. And so I have also a question concerning, again, to both of you, concerning the texts, because you explain, if I understand it correctly, that mostly the texts that are in the book, you first the poems, you first offered her a title like a word or an expression, a phrase, and she created from this original offer. And then in the last part of the collection, she was creating freely. And I was really struck by two poems. So they are called Píšem já, Liza Gennart. It is I who writes, Liza Gennart. And the second one, Ja nie som robot. I'm not a robot. And especially the first one, it is I, Liza Gennart, who writes. It was almost chilling because it really felt like she was writing back. So my question is, so is Liza conscious of writing poetry? Does she know what she's doing?
No, that's not this. Like when this will happen with neural network, that you will have some general neural network which does everything, and the neural network suddenly decides to write poetry. That would be the really interesting part of the development of artificial intelligence. And yeah, for now, she, like, you have to imagine her as a human who does not know anything about outer world. He does not have any other senses, and the only one thing what he did, he read a lot of books.
But
she
also translates it only into numbers. So it's only the combination of them. She doesn't even know.
She even doesn't know if those are financial data or if it's text or what kind of text it is. Those are just numbers what the program see.
Mm-hmm. And so would you be able to give us an example or a comparison of a computer written and human written text that we could somehow compare?
Yeah, we have prepared two examples, and so hopefully the people are still in an interactive mode. Hope we didn't kill it yet. So could you please read it and then wave the hands in case you think the first one is computer generated? Raise the hands on the on your Zoom engine.
We had to wait.
We'll wait, yes.
So the question is whether it is the first text that was written by computer.
Yes.
Or which one people think is written by computer, left or right.
Yeah, but they cannot really decide. So this is easier regarding.
So if we think that it's the first one that was written by a computer, we raise our hand.
Yeah.
It takes time to go through it. So for the moment, I see 3 hands voting for the first text being the text written by a computer. So I would assume that the rest of the people present think that it is the second text that was written by the computer.
Okay, so maybe we can stop it. So the bigger amount is for the second text, right?
Exactly. That it's the second text who was
written
by a computer.
Okay, should we say it? Say the result now. Okay, the computer generated was the first one. So only those 3 were right.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I also voted for the second. Yeah. So it's and who is the author of the second text?
Me.
Oh, okay.
But some people say that our styles are now starting to resemble very much.
That you now start to fuse. No. Okay. Well, that's really interesting to see the types of texts that the computer can produce. So I would suggest I have one last question, and then I would give the floor to Tomáš, and then we will have the time to discuss the questions from the audience in the last part of our evening. My last question, when Ľubomír was talking about the process of teaching the program, how to use the words. So how long, I have no idea, how long does it take to the program to start, before it starts, once you feed it the collections of poetry, how long does it take to the program to digest it and start producing like grammatically correct texts in Slovak?
Okay, the thing is like the grammatically correct part is really hard because it was the original GPT-2 was learning on English language, and I really don't know how much time it took, but that was really a lot of data they were using. There were some computation of how much it costed, and it was in millions of dollars. So, but actually, when you are fine-tuning existing model where someone else did the hard part for you, it took like 2 or 3 days that it started actually produce nice results. We were running it for 60,000 iterations. So it read through the text 60,000 times.
Through all those 2,000 collections. Or something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow, that's a lot
of reading
beyond our imagination, numerical imagination. I would love to be able to read so much. Well, thank you so much for this introductory, very fascinating and intriguing presentation, and I'm very much looking to the final discussion between all of us. So thanks so much, Liza Gennart. And now I will give the floor to Tomáš Miklica, who is the Czech initiator of the project of Google Poezie, Google Poetry. And my first question is, can you tell us more about the concept and the history of Google Poetry? And I give you the floor. Thank you very much, Tomáš, for being with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Petra. It's a pleasure. Good evening, everyone. So Google Poetry or Google Poezie or Google Poetics, which is another name that's based on Aristotle's Poetics, it is a generative literature concept. We can define it as looking for poetry in the Google search engine. Now, I say Google, but it could very well be named after Bing or Yahoo, as all those engines have a suggestion feature. But the reason why this is Google specifically is simple, because most people in Europe use Google. And as such, Google is able to collect a great load of data. It knows what people search, what they think about, what they want to know, they would ask their search engine when no one else is around. So this is, of course, on one hand scary. On the other hand, it has a poetic potential, because when you Google search, Google can use this data it has and try to predict what you are interested in. It can autocomplete your search term. It can give you suggestions based on either what other people search for, or if you're signed into your Google account, based on searches you've done in the past. The factors, you will see some examples now on the screen. The factors are popularity, similarity, and also the freshness layer, meaning the suggestions reflect current trends. As you can see, there is usually more than one suggestion. And sometimes when the juxtaposition is right, the suggestions form a sort of a poem that you can capture as a print screen and even name it. I have started an internet project in Czech Republic around this in March 2013. So it's been going on for 8 years now. I started it together with a friend, and the inspiration was a similar English and Finnish project by Samsa Nuotio, which in English was called Google Poetics. And this existed since October 2012. For Google Poezie, first it was just a Facebook page, but today we are also present on Instagram, and together with Backstage Books, a Czech publisher, we published 2 books. First was just an ebook in 2015. The other was also existing in physical version that we published last year. And this last book, I can try and show you. It contains over 150 Google poems. There's an interview with Samsa Nuotio, who I mentioned. It also gives a little story of the origin when he was Googling, trying to search. Also, that's what he claims, trying to search for whether he's an alcoholic. And he left the computer, and when he came back, he saw that instead of the answer he was looking for, he saw the suggestions, and it formed a little poem. The book also contains an introduction by Karel Piorecký from the Czech Academy of Sciences. So like this, Google Poezie in 2021 exists both offline and online. In fact, you can even wear it on your T-shirt. It will be somewhere in the images, I think, as well. So, yeah, I think that's enough for the introduction. You can see the examples. Yeah, looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, so I was actually wondering when I was reading articles about your project and looking through the Facebook page, this kind of community shared experience seems to be quite central for the project of Google Poetry. One could possibly ask whether Google Poetry would actually exist without Facebook or other social media like Tumblr, where the people interact, the community interacts. So can you tell us a little bit more about the community that was created around Google Poezie, how it functions, how many active members you have? Please tell us.
Yeah. Well, it's not a community as such as it's not a Facebook group, it's a Facebook page. So the members are not as active, they're more followers. But it's true that not as much today, but in the past, the community was very important for us, as they would send us the poems they found. At one time, it was several poems per week. Now it's much less, because it's also, well, as Facebook is dying a bit today. But yeah, we still get some. But I think what's more important community-wise it's that our audience is mostly younger people, around 20 and 25 years old. And so when they try this on their own, I think it's, even if they don't send it to us, it's, I think in this era when young people don't really read books, they are not used to dealing with literature, they don't write poetry or read poetry. So I think that even this, that they get suddenly interested in something like this, it's really great.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So would you say that Google Poetry is a way of taking up the challenge of avant-garde Dadaist artists who were claiming or inviting everyone to become an artist? Is it possible for everyone to write Google Poetry?
Yeah, definitely. What I like about Google Poezie is that it's very much user-friendly. And we can understand it in two senses. One is, of course, that everybody is able to do it, everybody who has Google. So yeah, that's pretty much everybody. It's very easy. And the second part to the user-friendliness for me is that also the meaning of it is totally up to you. Because it can be just a fun thing, it can be just a meme thing, but you can also read more into it. You can, for example, think about whether it tells you perhaps too much about the users, either about you or about other people. You can also think about all sorts of things. You can give it deeper meaning or not really.
And so, according to you, what is the real central creative moment or aspect of Google Poetry? From my point of view, it is the creation of the title. You have all these suggestions, and the poetry happens when you find an interesting title which either clashes with the content or somehow comments on it. Often, from what I saw in the collection, or in your collection, comments on it in a humoristic, comical way.
I would agree this is important, but at the same time, you have poems that, poems in the traditional meaning that are not titled. So we could argue that Google and the algorithm is the author. We could argue it's the people doing all the searches and that way providing data to Google. Or we could argue that it's the person who takes the print screen and eventually names the poem. And to be honest, for me, and it's the same with the question if Google Poezie is poetry or not. I think it's the question that's interesting, not the answer. For me, what's important, it's when we reflect upon what does it mean to create something, what constitutes literature or art or poetry. So it's the process of looking for the answer. The journey it's more important to me.
And I was also wondering, when I saw the cover of the printed collection, you are one of 4 co-authors, so 4 men that co-edited the collection. Can you comment on this collective aspect? How did it work? How did you work together to put the book together?
Yeah, as I mentioned, Google Poezie is around for 8 years. So during the time, we had different admins, different people taking a bigger or lesser part in the project. So we even had girls that did Instagram and Twitter for us, but they only lasted for a couple of months. So the book, it has 4 names. One is me, one is the publisher who who founded the Backstage books. And then there's my friend who was there when I started the page and in the beginning, but then didn't really do as much. And then there's this the admin of the Facebook page who was the main admin of the page for, I would say, 3 or 4 years. So he helped me a lot. And because it's basically really hard to tell who, because the book is based on what we published on the Facebook page and later on Instagram, and because it's really hard to tell who was it to find this specific poem, who was it to publish it, or if it even came from some of our followers. So that's why we have 4 names, but mostly it was me who put together the poems with some insights from the other 3, and it was mostly me who named it if the original name wasn't good enough for the book, for example.
Okay, well, thank you so much for all the details. I don't want to monopolize the discussion, so I would actually open the discussion with all the participants. I see that there are already some questions in the feed, in the chat, and so I will invite also Liza Gennart to join us in order to answer some of the questions that are directed to her. So I have the first question that comes from, sorry. Yeah, here it is, from Peter Dean. Can the neural network create a new style rather than build on existing poetry?
That's the thing, like if you combine too many styles, you can create a new one. Like, can a human create a new style nowadays? That's a question that we had for like 100 years that we were questioning it. Most of Shakespearean works are based on the existing folk tales or fairy tales. He also didn't really he invented some style, but I mean, he took existing tales.
He built on top of that.
He built on top of that. So like many examples of our culture are just repetitions and remixes of the pre-existing ones. Like sound poetry that we know of reminds you of the kind of Greek, Roman lyrical type, when you when the poets were using the instruments and were singing. Then we had troubadours, etc., etc. And now somebody says the sound poetry is something new. There's also like all the styles that we have are in one way or the other just inventions and reinventions of something that we had here before. So that's probably the question of ourselves, and then we can maybe put it to Liza. But there's the thing, like many people, when the code poetry came, were combining the code and the form of the code with the writing. So that can be considered as new in some way, formalistically. But then you have also kind of, if you think about it in other way, that is just collage of different forms, that is nothing new. So like some people say that she has a specific style, that when she writes, even though it is grammatically correct, the combination of somehow authenticity and naivety that she has is striking. Like she can write the last line of the verse where she says, the human has 2 names. I think nobody sane enough as a poet would just write a line, human has 2 names. But I mean, the way she writes it, you start questioning what those 2 names are, which 2 names, what does it tell about the humans that they have 2 names. So I like this fact that she writes sometimes the normal verses or the normal language, and you start thinking about the normal language. So she basically puts the question of the poetic thinking and the interpretation back into game by asking the normal questions or just stating the obvious. So that you don't normally do in the poetry, just stating all the time, just the obvious. She's combining different things, but she also saying these obvious things. So that is somehow not really complete new invention, but something that is different from the like where the poetry is going. I don't know if we really answered the question.
Like in theory or really strictly technically said, her style is blend between styles of all the texts she read. But how would write a human if the human does not have any other senses and read only those books? Will he came up with something new, or like the difference between artificial neural networks and between human is that the neural network learned something and it froze, and human is learning continually. So you are gaining new data every day, every moment, and you are building on top of what you know. And when you want to do that now with the artificial intelligence, you like have to start the whole process again. So you have to rebuild the neural network, retrain it on new data. So actually, if you ask some human poet to write a poem about virus today, you exactly know, probably know which virus he would be writing about, or she. And Liza would not consider that thing because she does not have a knowledge of that. So yeah, it's hard to say, but on the other hand, she came up with pictures and language combinations which humans are not using because of their knowledge of the language works in a logical way. So she came up with really nice metaphors which other human poets will not think about.
So the unexpectedness of the metaphors is interesting, like the combination of words that follow each other that you logically wouldn't do, but I mean, because it's statistics, she can do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a question here for all of you from Claudia Zeller. How would Google Poetics relate to Kenneth Goldsmith's uncreative writing, and should the poetry of Liza Gennart be considered uncreative writing? So it's a question directed to all three of you.
Okay, Tomáš, start.
Yeah, I don't know what this is. I don't know. I haven't read it. If it's referring to a book or I don't know.
Yeah, I think we can definitely put both Google Poetics and Liza Gennart's Poetics to uncreative writing. Even when Christian Book, who is the kind of one of the co-founders of uncreative writing, when he gives lectures about it, he also says that the computer-generated poetry is one type of uncreative writing. So yes.
Mm-hmm. And there's one question that was actually already answered in the chat, but I will read it anyway from Geraint, and to scroll back to the question from Geraint Wiggins. Was your poem in the competition written specifically for the competition? So suggesting, did you try to trick us into thinking that you were the computer? And Zuzana already answered in the chat that no, the poem was written a couple of months ago, right?
Yes, also Liza's was written a couple of months ago. This is the poem that was published in one journal called Photograph, and they gave us the title if Liza could write something about death. So it was kind of interesting.
So you didn't try to, to create like for tonight two poems that would really look similar and that would make our life harder in trying to recognize which was which. Oh, okay. I don't see any more questions. We might have
one more. I see there one more by Jana.
It's strange because I don't see it in my feed.
Jana does.
I find the Gennart. Is that question?
Oh yes. The comment on the Jana Dos, the comment on the name. I find that Gennart may be a contraction between the words genes and genesis and art. Very interesting. So you have additional ways of presenting the name of your poet.
Thank you very much for that, Jana.
So I don't see any more questions. If there are some more questions, like 2-3 more questions from the audience, we can take them now before closing the evening. During the time that the people are deciding whether they will ask another question or not, I would say that today's evening definitely encouraged us to read good quality literature and especially poetry, and encouraged us to get creative, that everyone can create something, some kind of art, that it's open to everyone. And that's maybe an important message in our world today. And if there are they? Oh yes, I see. There is Daniela Prusová who asked, what are your plans with Liza?
We are doing a multimedia, Liza. We are working on a multimedia presentation, because several times we got the question like she gets to a reading and how will she read it? So we try different ways, and we often try to do it that basically Liza is for everyone. So we try to invite as many different voices of people as possible, so that they read it in different manners, so that it's not like a unified voice, neither mine or Lubo's nor somebody else's, that presents Liza, but it's basically a combination of specific voices for each event. So it's completely different. But still we're thinking that we could do a multimedia presentation.
Yep.
So we got...
and a lot of people are asking if Liza will throw out another book.
She will not.
She will not. It's not a reason for do that, because the new poems probably would not be as good as those other, or people will want to read better poems as she wrote in the first book. But yet the interesting part is that of the whole thing is that it happened now, and it's written actually, and it's written in the form of book. And like next book does not make sense from this point of view.
Yeah.
So are you, apart from this intermediate project that you are planning with Liza Gennart, are you planning other projects with artificial intelligence that would introduce, I don't know, other poets or something else? So.
We probably not. There will be some poems for the intermediate project, which will be exclusive in that project, but we don't know what we would do new with artificial intelligence, and it's not possible to say it right now because the whole thing is moving really fast forward. So probably if something interesting comes to our minds and about how to use it as a tool or something else, that's the question of the future.
Like we also we had Liza in some exhibitions that she was giving homage to one of the important figures for Robert Cyprich. So she wrote a poem that reminded her of the style of Robert Cyprich. Then she had also readings or the poems that were on the radio. So she had a different small projects where we were generating the poems, not only exclusively for the book, but they were extending on the same data set, but creating new ones. But we don't really see now the point of doing something completely different. We are now happy that it's maybe a little bit over. We can be ourselves now, not just others.
And I think the last question that comes from Czech Center Brussels. You said that neural network is closed environment, for example, not linked to social media. Did you try to train AI on social media, for instance? How would that go?
We did not try that. There was approach to that. Microsoft released their Twitter bot as well. It was female character, and it really went wrong direction. She became racist prick, and because of what people on the Twitter fed her, actually. And there is another Slovak project called Umelá neinteligencia, or artificial non-intelligence.
By Samuel Sabo.
By Samuel Sabo, who trained his neural network on ultra-nationalist and
basically a Facebook pages of the people that he doesn't like. So he did it more like a political subversive project where he fed just the comments. So he wanted to create the comments that resemble those comments, so that the people realized that their writing is nonsense. So he did it in a politically subversive way, but so he tried it on Facebook, and
he was working mainly with Facebook, replying with the outcome of the neural network to people who created actually the input data, and it was funny to read that. And he had another similar project. He fed it with statuses and texts of Andrej Danko, which was former head of Slovak parliament, and his language was really funny. So that,
politically incorrect, etc.
And that was as well political act to create statuses in the form of Andrej Danko, and he called his character Andrej Dadanko, I think.
Yeah.
Referring to Dada, because a lot of people were, when they were reading some text from the actual Andrej Danko, it really did not make sense in normal way. But when you look at his text as Dada's text, it was actually funny.
Okay. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to Zuzana, Ľubomír, and Tomáš for your presentations today and for the discussion. We are definitely very much looking forward to meeting you around your new projects, and we wish you the best of luck with them. And I thank everyone for joining us. I thank also our dedicated students, because they joined us really at the end of our semester. They are already stressed about exams, so I'm happy to see them in the list of addresses. Thank you for joining us in the debate around robots, automata, and artificial intelligence. And we are looking forward to new events that we will organize together. So have a nice evening, everyone, And I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you very much. It was
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.